Hi, well, welcome everybody. Welcome to this session on greening finance and how businesses and employers can show leadership on climate action. I feel very lucky to be guiding this brilliant panel of women today. They're doing really fantastic work in this space, so it feels like a bit of an Avengers Assemble moment. So I'm glad you could join us. I'm Charlene Cranny, and I run Economy of Good, which is a platform I use to educate people about their finances and how to choose options that are ethical, sustainable, and building a better world. And I do that because I think we can all grow our money, but I think that we can grow it in a way that doesn't profit from harm being done to people or the planet. So today we're going to be focusing on moving our money towards green options, so avoiding financing the climate crisis and environmental breakdown. To give an idea of the types of figures we're talking about here, $4.6 trillion of our money is being used by banks to support the fossil fuel industry. I mean, that amount since 2016. $56 trillion of our pensions are invested globally, and a large proportion of that are invested in high polluting companies. So that's why you might have heard the figure that greening our pension is 21 times more powerful for reducing our carbon footprint than going veggie, switching to a renewable energy provider, and stopping flying combined. 21 times more powerful combined. So I'm assuming everyone here cares about a clean, green and healthy environment, but actually only 8% of people that have been surveyed have said that they've thought about moving their money away from the worst polluters. People aren't thinking about the impacts that their money can have, and where the alternatives options are. So businesses are starting to listen. They're taking climate more seriously, and that you don't have to be a high polluter to start thinking about climate. And all businesses are starting to think about this and starting to work on climate and sustainability strategies. And the government has even said it's going to start asking the largest companies for the evidence that they're taking this more seriously. So how can businesses take it more seriously when it comes to our finances? How can they start thinking about how to help their customers, their employees and their local communities? How can they support those people to start thinking about other options, green options for their money finances and investments? So this panel today has got a bunch of solutions that they're going to share. So we're going to hear from each of them in turn, and they're going to share for a couple of minutes, and then we'll go to Q&A at the end. So you can start putting your questions into the chat straight away, and then we'll come to them at the end. So I'm going to hand over to our brilliant panel now, and let's start with Becky.
Thanks, Charlene. I'm Becky O'Connor. I'm Head of Pensions and Savings for Interactive Investor, which is the UK's second biggest investment platform, which also offers pensions, I should say. So it's mainly pensions and ISAs. I'm absolutely delighted that we're supporting the Money Movers programme for several reasons. Money Movers, for those that aren't aware, because I'm not sure that everybody on the call is aware, is a network, a peer-to-peer learning network, if you like, that is focused on encouraging and mobilising money towards sustainable solutions. That's our money. So the money that we have in pensions and ISAs, but also bank accounts, and the way we spend our money too. I really love the peer-to-peer element of this and think it's really important in general for us to talk about money and the choices that we're making with our money. The FCA put something out this morning, and the number one thing it felt was the best advice to give on solving the debt crisis that we're currently facing with the cost of living crisis was people talking about money, which we don't do. So fundamentally, that's a really good thing. And of course, when you start talking about money and values, then quite quickly you get to a point where the financial choices you're making and how they match your values becomes a topic of discussion. So it's really important for us to talk about these things. It's really important for us to be aware of the options that are available. And I will look forward to pointing out some of the ways I think the industry can help us do that, because I don't think it all needs to be on us as individuals.
Thanks so much, Becky. Lisa, would you like to go next?
Thank you very much, and great to be here. I'm Lisa Ashford, CEO of Ethex and Energise Africa, which are two of the UK's leading impact investment platforms, and they allow ordinary people to invest and save aligned with their moral compass. So what does that mean in practice? It might mean that individuals are investing small amounts into community renewables projects, sustainable transport schemes, sustainable food and farming, etc. And very much allowing people to make personal choices about where they invest their money. And I think to start with, I think it's just worth saying that, when we're talking about businesses and thinking about financial services as a whole, we've sort of been let down as a society, I think, in terms of financial services and what has been presented to us over many years. We've had very complex, opaque products which don't necessarily appeal to individuals, and products which are actually very complex for us to navigate when we might not have that much of a background in finance. And so slowly and surely, I think that is changing, but we've been operating in a society which is sort of stacked against us to take individual action. And I'm really pleased to see that there's much more out there in the market in terms of accessible products, more information in terms of fees and what those are and how to compare different products and different platforms. And then when it comes to businesses themselves, they have so many different aspects in which they can help people. Is that the employees themselves who may be thinking about how their money is spent, either budgeting or investing or their pensions. It might be their customer base, helping to help their customer base to make better decisions about how they invest their money or how they are spending their money in a way that contributes much more dramatically towards this journey of getting to net zero that we are on course to do. So I'm looking forward to exploring all of those different things in more detail as we crack on through this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lisa. That was great. Ellen, would you like to go next?
Thank you, Charlene. Yep. Hello, everybody. My name's Ellen, and I've been working in the marketing communications team at Triodos Bank in the UK for the last 6 years. I've done a variety of different things, but more recently, I've been working on our policy and advocacy work that aims to change the whole financial system for the better. So for those that don't know what Triodos do, we call ourselves a sustainable bank. And we were actually founded in the Netherlands back in 1980. So we have been around a while, and we're now active in 5 European countries and have been in the UK since 1995, but are still relatively small versus the big players in the banking industry. We were founded with a mission, and this sounds a bit funny coming from a bank, founded with a mission to work for a society with human dignity at its core through using money consciously. So it's very much the kind of positive impact coming first, and then the bank being a vehicle for doing that. And the main way in which we act as a sustainable bank is through the way we lend and invest our customers' money. And we only do that in organizations who meet strict minimum standards, not only environmental, but also social, and considering many other factors, but also who are actively contributing to tackling social and environmental challenges. So there has to be some positive impact too. So for example, taking positive climate action. And I liked what Lisa just said about the industry having let people down. And I think that's a little bit at the crux of what Triodos is about. It's saying actually people deserve better banks, right? Banks should be a force for good and have a responsibility to be a part of the solution here in tackling challenges. And one of the ways that we're trying to do that at the moment is through launching our own net zero strategy. And at the time we launched it at COP26 in November, it was one of the most ambitious in the industry, but actually we're very much framing it in a way that says it's not about us storming off and getting to net zero. It's about the whole industry changing. It's about us supporting those organizations we work with and our customers to come on that journey too, and about us all moving together in a way that's just and fair and appreciates social factors as well. So I think it's awesome that we're here talking about how businesses can support people today. And also, as both Becky and Lisa have said, that we're talking about how we can raise awareness of the link between finance and climate action. As on a very personal note, I was lucky enough as a student to find out that Triodos existed, to find out about the sustainable finance world, and I think to become a little bit of a groupie of all things sustainable finance. Very cool, obviously. So I very much felt like it's been my mission to shout from the rooftops about the connection between finance and so many challenges and changes we might want to make in our lives or in the wider world. And I love that that's what Money Movers as an initiative is empowering people to do within their peer-to-peer networks. And I think notably it's not only about like what organizations like Triodos are financing, but as I've said, about how we can change the wider system. And that's not only financial institutions, but obviously, as we've been saying, it's businesses too. And I truly believe that talking about money thing that I think it was Rebecca referenced is something that businesses can really drive, not only talking about people's personal finances, but also how as an organization, your focus might historically have been more on profit and economic outcomes, but actually how are you changing the narrative a little to think about value more holistically, and to think about, as a business, maybe you're investing more in people and planet, and therefore you can empower your employees, community, customers to do the same.
Thanks, Ellen, that was great. Stephanie, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Biden. I'm a partner in the Charity and Social Enterprise team at Bates Wells. And Bates Wells is a law firm which is focused on positive social and environmental impact. And we're the first law firm in the UK to have become a B Corp. I'm going to say also I made a technical error, I think, in how I've set up the device that I'm presenting on. So I may vanish in a few minutes after I've introduced myself and reconfigure it. But in 2019, Bates Wells formally recognised the climate and biodiversity crises, and we made a series of commitments about what we were going to do in response. And these included decreasing our own carbon emissions to achieve net zero in 2019 on our scope 1 and 2 emissions, and to work to identify and reduce our scope 3 emissions, to take the crisis into account in developing our business strategy, to use law as a means to address the crisis, to engage all our people in decisions relating to our impact on the climate and biodiversity crisis and encourage them to live in more environmentally friendly ways, and to collaborate with others to amplify our impact and to assess and report on our progress annually. And that's because we recognised we were at the start of a journey and we didn't quite know where that journey was going to take us, but we wanted to make sure we were held accountable and transparent for our progress on an ongoing basis. Internally, we then set up a climate programme board to oversee our progress and to keep us accountable, and our managing partner and COO sit on that climate programme board, and it reports up to the firm's management board. As a law firm, we recognise that the emissions from our own operations are relatively low. So we only have one office, we don't have large levels of business travel, we're not manufacturing anything. So our biggest impact is really on how we can use the law as a tool for good, and also the influence that we can have on Bates Wells' own people through the way that we engage with them, and that's really the focus of today's event. So we committed to using law as a tool for good. That means we work with a number of clients who are focused on addressing the climate emergency, and they include NGOs, charities, public authorities and businesses. And recently it's a little bit tangential to the issue of encouraging our people to green their finances, but we're really delighted to have won a landmark High Court case which looked at charity trustees' investment duties. And it clarified that charity trustees can prioritise mitigating climate change over financial returns in their charities' investments. So the judgment in this case approved the trustees' decision to align charity investments with the goals of the Paris Agreement, and that they could do that despite the potential for financial detriment caused by limiting the charity's investments in that way. That means that charities now need to balance all relevant factors, in particular the extent of any potential conflict with a charity's objects when they make a particular investment, even when that involves financial risk by excluding large parts of the market. In terms of seeking to support individuals, I think where we can have the biggest impact is with the people that work at Bates Wells, and we found it's often easier to engage them with the more tangible things like our default vegetarian catering policy or the recycling schemes we have, where you can bring in things like used contact lens packaging or medicine blister packs and have those recycled. And we also have a travel policy which offers paid journey days for staff who take more environmentally sustainable means of transport for their personal holidays. But we know that it's our personal finances, and particularly switching how pensions are invested, that has been the single biggest action that an individual can take to respond to the climate crisis. And that far outweighs the changes like diet or personal travel. So we have been supporting our people to switch their pension. It's been one of the most challenging issues. It's more difficult than giving people a subsidy to switch to a green energy provider. More difficult than giving them information about you might want to think about where you switch your bank account. But when we made our commitments to recognise the climate crisis, we consulted people on whether they'd like to see the firm offer a more sustainable default pension fund, and we had a very positive response to that. So we then met with our pension provider Aviva to look at the funds that would be available. We were relatively easily able to make a fund available. What's taken more time is to make that into our new default fund. And so from February 2022, all new joiners to the firm are now automatically enrolled in a stewardship fund, which is a more sustainable fund than our previous default fund. We've also been trying to make it easy for our employees to switch to this fund. And so to support them in doing that, we've both made a financial commitment ourselves as a firm to hold ongoing investment governance meetings with our benefits portal and with Aviva to track the fund's performance, because that wasn't already incorporated in the fund as it stood. And as part of London Climate Action Week last week, we held a webinar with an independent responsible investment advisor to talk about the positive impact that a green pension has. And we've been encouraging people to, or supporting them to be able to switch by providing them with information about the new default fund, how they can make that switch, including that information in things like letters that give people details of their annual salary review, which is a time when people commonly will think about looking at how their pension's doing and what contributions they want to make. So that's where we're at, but it's taken us a while, and there have been challenges along the way, which maybe we'll come on to discuss. So great to be able to share that with you today.
Great, that was really interesting, Stephanie, and I might come back to you to just ask a bit more about that and yeah, how difficult that was or how easy that was, just to yeah, I guess reveal to the audience what that experience would actually be like in practice. But Anneka, would you like to go next?
Great, thanks, Charlene. So I'm Anneka, and I'm from Money Movers, and I'll talk a little bit about what Money Movers does and then talk about the role that business can play in that. So Money Movers is a movement of women who are taking climate action with their personal finances using the power of peer support. So what we do is we train women up as hosts to bring together groups of friends and colleagues together to talk about the often taboo topics of money and climate change. And through having those conversations, sessions and taking part in a number of different sessions together, women over the course of 3 sessions support each other to take tangible climate action through their finances, through things like switching their bank accounts or their pensions, or making sustainable investments. And the key here is that women, by coming together around things like dinner tables and Zoom rooms, create braver spaces that are free from judgment or preaching, being told what to do, and kind of free from the gloom and the shame that often comes with thinking about money, and also thinking about our role in climate action. And the exciting thing about the Money Movers programme is that it really works. So far in our pilots, 140 women have moved £1.2 million for climate action. And so they've done that through switching bank accounts. 28% of people switch their bank accounts, 20% switched their pensions, and 20% of the people who took part in our pilots made an ethical investment. Some of those did that for the first time. And every woman, the exciting bit is that every woman reported feeling more financially empowered to take climate action through just 3 Money Movers sessions. So we know there's huge potential to scale this impact model and mobilise thousands of women to vote with their money and create the climate future that we need. And so when it comes to businesses' role in that, there's a couple of vital roles that business plays in scaling up this kind of grassroots climate initiative of Money Movers. One is that sponsors support our programme, and through sponsoring the programme actually support us to reach more women in communities. And so our aim is to scale up this year to reach 500 women. Our aim over this decade is to reach 30,000 women and move £1 billion by 2030. And so sponsors really help us get one step further towards those goals. And in doing that, they show that they're demonstrating a climate action initiative which has tangible impact to grow, and they're showing their values in action, as well as those sponsors sometimes taking part in the programme as well. The other way in which businesses are supporting an initiative like Money Movers is by actually trying out the programme internally. So employers are actually supporting their own employees to train up to host these Money Movers sessions with their colleagues. And so they're giving their employees a really meaningful opportunity to engage with deeper climate change issues and grow the confidence to take climate action themselves, and also really align their own values in an organisational setting, and have those conversations with colleagues that they might not otherwise get a chance to have. So those are just 2 ways in which businesses are supporting an initiative like Money Movers. There are other organisations out there who are also supporting people to take action with their money and greening their finances. And I think business has a really important role to play in supporting those initiatives and getting involved with them.
Thanks, Anneka. Great. Okay, well, let's move into sort of question time now. And I think we all agree here we want to make the world a better place. We know that, the climate crisis is something that we have to quickly respond to. And we've all talked about how our money can play a role in that. So let's get really practical. So my first question is around whether there really are good green alternatives right across all products. I think it still feels quite niche. Green finance is not front and center. So it would be good to hear from the panel on what options are available and where they can be found. Becky, I wonder if I can start with you on that one.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, you're right. In some product areas, there's lots of choice. And that's mainly investment. So if you've got spare money to invest in an ISA, for example, then you have got some choice. It can be difficult to choose between those choices, but there is some choice. There is choice with pensions too, but it's fairly limited, and it's limited, depending on what your workplace offers or what your previous pension providers from old jobs offer. you can switch to self-invested personal pensions, but then that involves investing your pension yourself, which if you're not very confident can be problematic. But I'd say those two areas there are more choice. When it comes to current accounts, mortgages, insurance, savings, the more kind of day-to-day products, there are fewer options. I would say the direction of travel is great. There is a growing number of options, but very often they're kind of digital apps, challenger banks that haven't been around for very long, that are trying to push more in this area and do more in this area. When it comes to insurance, the choice is really quite poor. And perhaps instinctively you wouldn't think insurance is something that you would be able to be green with, but actually insurers invest premiums, so in theory there should be some green opportunity there. It's just that there hasn't really been demand for it in that space, so perhaps insurers are a little bit behind. Green mortgages is a strong growth area at the moment, mainly because of the work of the Green Finance Institute, which is looking at ways of incentivizing homeowners to make energy efficiency changes through offering them lower rates on their mortgages. So it's a bit of give and take. It involves some effort from homeowners with mortgages to make those changes in order to get the green mortgage rate incentive, but it's a start. And I think, some lenders are quite proactively looking at ways they can improve the kind of green credentials of their green mortgage. And there are some really good providers in the space who have been looking at green mortgages and offering them for a long time, who are kind of best in practice. And I'm thinking Ecology Building Society, for instance. But not everyone is going to be eligible for those loans. It comes down to that. The range of options available to you does depend on your financial needs and your financial circumstances. And so not everyone is going to be able to avail themselves of all the options. But I think, as a first pass, pensions, ISAs, current accounts are the areas that you can make big changes. And of course, if you're lucky enough to have some spare money to invest, that's great. And that's where you can make a significant difference too.
Thank you, Becky. So it looks like there are some options out there. So for businesses worried about whether there are worse options in terms of cost and returns, what can we say about that? I wonder if, Lisa, you can reassure people that it doesn't necessarily cost more, or does it?
It's a good point. And I think that it's quite a sort of patchwork picture out there in terms of what the different fees are, and also the transparency of those fees. Just personally, having been tasked by my partner to set up a junior ISA, he said, you better go and do that because I'll probably do it wrong. And, I said, well, obviously I'll want an ethical option as well. And so actually trying to squirrel down into the detail of all of those different providers and what the costs are and how they display those costs, because they're done in different ways to sort of, one could argue as a cynic, to try and bamboozle you as an individual. It's not that straightforward. And I hate to say that, because I want to say, yes, it's so easy and it's not more costly, but actually I'd say that it's not a consistent story across all providers and out there in the marketplace. So I think you have to pick and choose. I think you have to do your homework. I know that we are seeing in some cases more positive returns from ethical products, depending on what they are. So one could argue that you are offsetting any slightly higher fee with a potentially longer term, more sustainable return. I'm not sure how much evidence there is to that, but I would like to see that sort of played out in the future.
Thanks, Lisa. And maybe Alan, you could talk a bit about your bank's fees and how they might look different and how you report those to your customers.
Yeah, thanks, Charlene. And I can see Stephanie wants to comment as well after. But yeah, I think it's a really good discussion to have and to be open about, because I think there's a lot of, particularly in banking, there's a lot of big banks that have been in the game a long time, that have economies of scale, that have massive teams doing things, and that if you need, sort of to Becky's point, if you need the most economically viable option that's going to protect your finances best in the short term and be least costly, they probably can offer you the best options if you're just looking at it through that lens. And so there definitely is still there are still some barriers to people, and even at Triodos we recognize that our products probably aren't appropriate for everybody right now, and that's, I guess, where we want to move into changing the default options, as we've kind of discussed. But our current account, I think, is quite an interesting case study of the thing that we were referring to there around transparency of fees. So when we brought the product to the market, which was only in 2017, there was a lot of research done around the kind of hidden costs of running current accounts. And many people might not be aware that in a lot of countries outside of the UK, it's perfectly normal practice to pay for your current account services and to appreciate that the bank is like providing you with a service there. Whereas we're quite used to having like free banking in the UK. But actually often, because of the lack of transparency in the system and the hidden fees and charges, people's current accounts will almost be like cross-subsidized. So if some people are like accruing overdraft fees because they've gone into the red on a, then those fees that are then paid might be cross-subsidizing other people's current accounts. And we kind of felt like that wasn't fair, that particularly those people who might be most vulnerable financially might end up paying more. So we then smacked a flat £3 a month fee onto our current account product, which then versus the rest of the market looks like bizarre in the UK really, and is, we know, a barrier for some people. So I think, yeah, it's a live challenge, and it's something that needs to be openly discussed. And the issue around transparency of fees is definitely something we could open up more and get more banks particularly to be talking more openly about what they're doing there.
Thanks, Ellen. And that was some really good insight there. Stephanie, did you have a comment? I might have missed your hand going up.
I was just going to briefly say, I think there are costs. So if businesses are hesitant, it's good to be realistic about that. So with the switch to the new default pension fund that we are offering our employees, that has a higher management charge than the non-sustainable kind of default fund that we had before, and we've had to let people know that when they're considering whether to make the switch. But there's also a cost that's been borne by Bates Wells, which is to have these regular investment review meetings with Aon, who provide our benefits portal, and with Aviva, who have the fund, because that wasn't already built in, but we wanted to make sure that it was suitable as a fund that we could offer as a default fund for our people. So we've decided to bear that cost ourselves. But I think I'd encourage businesses not to be put off just by those costs, because I think, you know, with our employees, we find they're really looking for that there's this strong demand for that provision for a pension fund that aligns with people's values. And I think particularly, you know, people are drawn to work at a firm like Bates Wells because they want to work at a place which is a more purpose-driven business, and that flows into the rest of their life. But I think particularly people at the start of their careers are really conscious you can have, you know, as much money as you like in your pension fund, but you can't retire on a dead planet. So it's quite short-sighted, I think, just to be looking at the sort of short-term cost implications and not thinking about the bigger picture.
Really great point. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And Nikki's asking why higher interest rates don't seem to be applied to green savings accounts in particular. Does anyone know why that is?
I can come on that from our point of view, in that I think if you're applying a very simple banking model, then kind of the money that you make, the profit that you make as a bank, is the difference between what you're paying out in interest to savers and what you're charging in interest to the organizations that you finance. So at Triodos, we always try and set our interest rates at a fair point so that we can give a fair return to those people who are saving with us, but we also don't have to charge the organizations who are going out doing that positive stuff in the world that we're financing too much in terms of their of the rate of interest they then pay us on their loans. So there's always this kind of balancing act to strike, and I think we have to strike that balance because we only finance organizations in the real economy and we only use our customers' money to do so, whereas often bigger banks might be doing different things, or as Becky's just put in the chat, having a higher rate for a short amount of time or using it as an offer or something like that. So I think the kind of true sustainable fair rates are often very different to the market leading rates, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks. I hope that answered that question for you, Nikki. So we've talked about availability, we talked about cost. I'd really love to hear from Anneka on whether there are other barriers to green finance and investment that you're hearing from your women that are on your programme.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest barriers is that this stuff, when you get into it, isn't, as Lisa said, it's not easy, it's not straightforward. And for many of us, if we don't work in financial services, we don't actually understand how banks really work. We don't understand how a lot of these financial firms really work. And so there's a really big kind of confidence and overwhelm gap that we have to get over in order to take action. And you know, Lisa looking for those junior ISAs and how not straightforward that is. That's one of those things that for so many of us, we want to align our behavior with our values, but actually the kind of life admin involved, the time involved, and also that feeling of like, oh, I'm out of my depth, you know, those are really hard feelings to overcome. And so I think when it comes to empowering people to take action, you know, for Money Movers, our whole premise is based on this idea of peer support, of people talking to each other, of having a buddy and staying in the trouble of it all together with someone else. So when you come across someone talking about fees for different types of accounts, you can talk to someone else who's also navigating that problem and kind of be like, oh, I saw that this company launched this new product. What do you think of it? And having someone to ask those questions to helps us all stay with the trouble of you know, doing this type of switching. And I think when it comes to what's the role that business can play in that, you know, so many of us spend so much of our lives at work, and that's kind of for many of us an automatic community that we belong to. And so if there's a culture within businesses of people having these conversations with your employer, taking a leadership role, as Stephanie has outlined there, in supporting these conversations to happen, I think it all helps us to kind of stay with that, and not just go to, you know, the default option of what, you know, what's my default pension, or what's the bank account that I opened because of a rail card that I offer when I was a student. And there's so many of us who actually are still in that position, even though we really care about the planet and we really care about the environment.
Thank you. And Sarah asked a question, if there are any web platforms like Money Supermarket that can send people to more sustainable options. Well, no, not like that. And I actually think that would make a fantastic campaign. So Pension Bee, they started to offer a fossil fuel-free pension once they got a few complaints from their customers. So with those comparison websites, it would be so fantastic if they integrated this. So there's a campaign there for somebody. Right, let's just see what else is. Yeah, so there was a question about ESG and low cost ESG funds. Becky, you had an answer for that one.
Yeah, and also actually on the website, I'd point out Good With Money is a good website, which I co-founded in 2015, which offers lists of sustainable products, sustainable financial products, which could be helpful. It doesn't have a comparison function as such, but it does give you the opportunity to sort of single out some providers that are worthy of special mention and the kind of rates that they offer.
Absolutely, and I'm so sorry I didn't mention that.
It's all right.
Amazing, good list. They're really fantastic. I always point people to you. So yeah, thanks for reminding me.
It's there. It could be useful if you want to have a look. Yes, on the question of passive ESG ETFs, there is a trade-off, and it's basically this. The ETFs are cheap because they just track an index, or they track a basket of funds, and it's designed to be cheap and sort of low maintenance from the fund manager's point of view, which makes the kind of investment strategies that are required for positive impact quite difficult to do in that space, because that's fundamentally a more expensive process to find the companies and choose the companies that are going to both be really good for the planet and also grow people's money. So those funds come with higher fees, and actually there's some investment trusts that are even more expensive. But and actually it's worth saying as well that when stock markets haven't been great since the beginning of the year, and then fees do become more important to you as an individual, because not only are you losing money on the actual performance of the funds, but also even more money on the fees that you're paying. So it is an important question to ask, and it is worth looking at. Also, if you are if you have very strong values and you know exactly what you want to invest in, and you want to be positive impact only, it's quite difficult to find passive funds that are also cheap, that are also going to do that for you. Some are better than others. It's not one size fits all, even in the passive space, and they are getting better as the sustainable investment universe improves and matures, and there are more companies involved in things like renewable energy. That improves and expands the universe for you as investors. So I do think that passive funds will both become better at sustainability, and hopefully also the positive impact funds will also be able to become cheaper over time, but we're not there yet. So always look at the fees, just be mindful that there may be a trade-off if you're going for the cheaper options.
Thanks, Becky. Steph, there's a couple more questions coming in, but I really want to hear a bit more from Stephanie on the process of kind of integrating all of this into your business. Can you talk a bit more about that process? Was it hard? What was hardest? What was easier than you thought? Perhaps we can just give some people some tips.
I'm really happy to try and talk about it. If anyone here wants to sort of follow up offline as well, please feel free, because I wasn't directly involved in that switch, but I would be happy to put you in touch with my colleagues who were. I know that it was much easier to make a fund available that people could switch into than it was to change our default fund, and that's because of the responsibilities that we had towards our employees, and the fact that we felt we needed to do quite a lot of due diligence into what the implications were of switching the default fund, and whether that might disadvantage them in any way. I think we're also really conscious that there's a fine line between wanting to raise awareness of these personal financial issues and encourage people to think about the social and environmental impact of the investment choices they're making, but at the same time not being seen to give financial advice, which is something that we can't do. So that's why we've had a couple of webinars where we have had people come in who are investment managers or independent financial advisors who can run webinars, and even then we have to be really careful to say, this isn't advice for your own personal situation, and it's really important to get appropriate advice for your personal situation. So I think that the big challenges have been around walking that kind of balance between how do you raise awareness and maybe have a bit of a kind of trying to have a bit of a nudge effect without giving financial advice, and then the fact that there wasn't a fund that was easily available, that had the right kind of governance built into it. And so we've had to do a bit of work around the fund governance and review in order to make it suitable to be a default fund. So overall, I think it was probably late 2019 when we started asking our employees, would you like a greener pension offering? Would you like us to explore this? And opening that conversation. I think it was 2020 when we had an option available and started having some webinars to explore this, but it's only really earlier this year in February that we switched our default fund for new joiners. So it has taken a while just to work through the suitability of the options and what the implications would be, and how we balance the values that we want to uphold and encourage people to engage with other responsibilities that we have to people working for us.
Thank you. And I wonder if anyone else on the panel, maybe Anneka or Lisa, can talk more about conversations you're having with businesses and some of the challenges that are coming up again and again, and perhaps some of the solutions that you've thought about to some of those recurring challenges. Anneka.
Yeah. So I think something that we're really hearing from businesses we're talking to is about the necessity of really taking climate change seriously in terms of attracting talent. So, I think there was a report out recently that said 2/3 of employees say values alignment is really important for them choosing whether to join a firm or stay with an organisation, and it's only going to become more important over time. And businesses have been thinking a lot about the idea of employee well-being and how they can give back and give back to the community. But a few years ago, perhaps 15 years ago, it was about ping pong tables in the office and giving your employees volunteering days to paint a fence at a school. But employees have wised up. And they know that doesn't actually change anything. And so what employees are looking for is ways that they can really engage with their values and take action and feel supported by their employer to do that. So whether that's supported with the time, supported with the opportunities, supported with options that are available to them, people want to see that really meaningful engagement from their employer. And I think the piece that Stephanie touched upon there about not giving financial advice, I think that's the other kind of really big concern, I think, from everybody really, because things are changing so much. And so, something that was true 3 months ago or 6 months ago might not necessarily be true today. And our biggest kind of learning from that is that instead of, I think, lots of us have been in the school system and in the university system where we go to a place and someone gives us answers and we're told what to do. And that is actually what we hear from a lot of people who want to take part in Money Movers. Like, I just want someone to tell me what to do. But really, we're always going back and encouraging people, how can we create spaces where we're supporting people to ask questions, become more confident with the types of questions they're asking, so that they can do their own research and stay up to date themselves. And so I think businesses supporting people to develop the capabilities to do that research themselves and to have conversations and to feel confident about saying, I don't know, what is the real economy? Asking questions like that. I think that's one of those kind of, it's one of those enabling factors that businesses can really support people to overcome, so that when they're going out there and actually engaging with this, they have the confidence to be able to ask the questions and do the research.
Thanks, Anneka. And another question that comes up a lot is around greenwash. So who to trust? And I have put a link to some tips in the chat there. But I wonder if, Lisa, you could talk a bit about how you kind of show your impact and communicate with your customers, and yeah, kind of give some tips to people out there that might be greenwashing and how to do it well. Not greenwash, but the proper impact stuff well.
Yeah, it's obviously a discussion that we're having more and more now. as it becomes, you know, very cool to market yourself as a green business or having green products, and you know, you're actually sort of running a business risk if you're not doing that, if you know what I mean. But there are those that are doing it at a superficial level, and those that I think have that running through their core. And I think it's really important to try and, if you can, differentiate between those types of businesses or services, and really understand, you know, what is the true purpose of the organization that you are dealing with, and getting a real sense of that. From our standpoint, it's about being very clear and transparent about what we do, and making it really tangible for people to understand exactly what their money's doing. And I suppose that's the very essence of Ethex and Energise Africa, where individuals can invest directly into specific projects, and they can see exactly what the money will be used for, what the impact is intending to be, and indeed, you know, whether that actually comes to fruition or not. And, you know, these projects are incredibly impactful. They change people's lives. They have the ability to, you know, create real lasting positive impacts all around the country. And, you know, something that we sort of start talking about as well is how, you know, what we do, how is it playing a part in this just transition? So not just about, you know, very city-centric solutions or, you know, southern solutions. How are we transforming what we do from a sort of climate point of view all around the country, and really inspire individuals to take action, and for there to be, you know, substantial, sustainable future that we're building.
Thank you. And I want to ask Ellen as well, and just very quickly, because then we're going to need to wrap up, and I want to get some final words from people. But yeah, banking, it's, you know, there are a lot of net zero commitments that we're seeing. Yeah, more financing is going to fossil fuels. You know, the marketing is all about being banks for the people, and communities, yeah, are still funding all of these bad companies. Like, how, you know, how can people tell the difference?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Lisa said. I think a lot of that stands in that it's trying to look at the kind of whole company's ethos rather than just a few investments. And also, like, are they doing it holistically? Are they just talking about decarbonisation and net zero and green stuff? Or are they looking at things more generally, looking at the impact of people, looking at the just transition? That's all vitally important in banking too. But the biggest one for me is, how transparent are they about where they're putting your money? Like, if they won't tell you what they're doing with the money that you're entrusting to them, and you can't find that information readily available on their website, then it's probably a red flag, regardless of the marketing that they're putting out there.
Thanks, Ellen. Okay, so we're going to have to start wrapping up now, but I'd really love from each of you a kind of a next step, or, you know, an action for both a business, an organization, an employer, and one for each of us, what we could do personally. Can I start with you, Anneka?
Yeah, sure. So I think my recommendation for both is to ask questions and talk to other people, talk to peers. So as a business, talking to if you're in a position of responsibility, talking to your peers about what your business is doing to support people, talking about your pensions. And if you're not in a position of responsibility, asking those questions to the people who are. And then as an individual, you know, having one friend who's the person who you start having these conversations with can really kind of help you overcome some of those barriers to taking action.
Thank you. Becky, how about you? Can you go next?
Yeah, sure. So for employers, I think financial well-being programs that also incorporate sustainable and values-based financial decisions would be really helpful. I mean, it can go from basic things like how to understand your pay slip through to how to choose a sustainable pension fund, and also be aware of the options that you can offer people that you may not currently be offering through different arrangements. For instance, employers can, if they want to, pay their contributions into an employee's SIP. So it may be difficult to arrange and administer, but it is possible for an employee to open a SIP and ask the employer to pay into that and choose their own investments within a self-invested personal pension if they're not happy with the pension on offer from an employer. So see if there's some flexibility that you can offer to employees who are really motivated in general. In terms of us as individuals, just keep at it. And if Rome wasn't built in a day, and if you don't change your pension, your current account and your ISA and all of your insurance products this week, don't worry about it, don't give up. Just tick them off your list slowly. It can take a long time. It can be disheartening if you try too much too soon.
Thank you. Lisa.
I suppose for a business, just to think about where they have the biggest potential influence, because, you know, it might not necessarily be where they think it is to start with. So just really thinking outside of the box and thinking about how they can influence others, whether it's other businesses or their customers, as well as their own individual employees. And then individually, just take small steps, you know, just because you can't, as Rebecca said, just because you can't do a big thing straight away, that doesn't mean to say that you can't do something. And I think actually taking those small steps is, you know, what provides you with a bit of momentum to get going and builds your confidence. So yeah, start small.
Thank you. Ellen, how about you?
I'm going to do one for both as well in the interest of time. I think this applies to both businesses and organizations. And I think it's something about remembering that we're all part of this system, businesses, individuals, of money moving around the world. We often use a phrase like, we are all bankers, like we all make choices with our money all the time, every day, big, small, and we can do those consciously and we can make small changes with that.
Stephanie.
I'm going to say open the conversations if you're not having them yet, whether that's within your workplace or with a trusted friend or peer at a personal level. Start those conversations about the impact of finances, because you don't know where they will lead. And I put an example in the chat where, off the back of one webinar about our pension offering, one of my colleagues not only switched the pension she had at Bates Wells, but also went and looked up what was the options for the pension she had from the law firm she used to work for. And then she went and opened a current account with Triodos, and it was just all off the back of one conversation. But then keep having those conversations, because the power of inertia is also really strong. So some people might go to a webinar or a meeting and think, yeah, I'm going to do something, and then it just drops down the to-do list. So keep raising the issues, keep that little kind of nudge, the signposting the information about what individuals can do, so that it doesn't just drop off their radar or drop off our own radar just through being crowded out by other things. So start the conversations and keep having them.
Thank you so much. Okay, we've run very slightly over, but I hope those tips were worth it. And just thanks so much for everyone, to everyone for coming. I really enjoyed that. I hope the Avengers will be back together at some other point soon. And yeah, if everyone wants to take themselves off mute and say goodbye, that would be great. We'd welcome that. Thanks again.
Thank you.